Hi everyone, this is Chamali with a quick deck tech for the tribal combo deck I played at last week's Tribal Apocalypse. So, the most important thing about this deck is that it has no lands in it, which means I'm able to use a card like this Undercity Informer to sacrifice a creature, reveal cards from the top of my library till I reveal a land, and put them in my graveyard. Because there are no lands, this lets me dump the whole deck into the graveyard, and from that point I have a combo which lets me win the game. Narcomoebas, which can come into play when they're milled from my library. Cabal Therapy to look at my opponent's hand to see if they have any counterspells. And Dread Return to bring back this card, Angel of Glory's Rise, which brings back all humans from my graveyard. The deck is human tribal, with exactly 20 humans in it, and the win condition is this Laboratory Maniac. I win the game when I draw a card with no cards in my library. Also Azami, which lets me draw cards right away. As for the cards that let me do it, there's Undercity Informer. It's a total cost of 4 mana to activate him. Same with Balustrade Spy, although he's a vampire and not a human, so he doesn't count towards the deck's human count. And then there's Avenging Druid, an older card from Exodus. He has to damage my opponent in order to activate the combo, so I didn't use him nearly as much as the other two in this tournament. I do have him in there and he can work occasionally, but it's much riskier play than the others. As for the rest of the human count, I've got this card Wild Cantor, which can convert red mana into green or black mana, which is useful. Also exiles the Chrome Mox to produce mana that's red or green. This Vhati il-Dal I have in the deck simply because I want either black or green mana, and I can exile him to Chrome Mox. Then there's Architects of Will, which I can cycle for 1 black mana, so occasionally it can be useful to cycle that and draw more cards if I have a Chrome Mox, another card, and the Architects of Will in my hand. Overall though, I think the Architects of Will were not working in the deck, and I would rather have something like an Abzan guide that can produce green or black mana when it's imprinted on Chrome Mox. Now the rest of the deck is simply ways of generating mana. Simian Spirit Guide produces red mana, with Wild Cantor to turn that into black mana. Elvish Spirit Guide, green mana. Summoner's Pact, I search for a green creature, put it in my hand, and lose the game next turn unless I can pay 4 mana. This deck will generally win the same turn it casts its combo, so it's safe to use Summoner's Pact to find Elvish Spirit Guide as a source of green mana. Then I've got Chrome Mox, which imprints another card from my hand to tap for mana. Lotus Petal, which I sacrifice for 1 mana of any color. Dark Ritual, a very powerful spell that makes 3 mana out of 1. And Cabal Ritual, which provides 3 mana out of 2. It's very rare that I'll ever reach Threshold with this deck, so Cabal Ritual will not tend to use that second ability. Now let's move on to the games with this speedy deck and see how they went. So this is from my 4th match of the day against Sligle79. So it's always a matter of looking at my opening hand, figuring out if I'm able to combo off or not with what I've got. Here I had a very strong hand of 7. It's got mana sources, it's got an Undercity Informer. I'm able to use the combo right away. Sligle opens with a Stromkirk Noble, a good aggressive red vampire. But unfortunately for him, I've got the combo right away. Wild Cantor makes black mana, Cabal Rituals let me cast Undercity Informer, then I put my whole deck into my graveyard from the Undercity Informer's ability. So then I'll be returning some Narcomoebas from my graveyard to the battlefield. And from here, I'm casting Dread Return out of my graveyard. This spell, flashback cost of sacrifice 3 creatures. It's made a presence in my other decks as well. I'm no longer allowed to earn achievements with decks that have Dread Return in them, because I like odd combo decks, and this is a card that really finds uses in a lot of weird places. So from this point I use Cabal Therapy, see my opponent's hand, and then I'll target Angel of Glory's Rise with Dread Return. So I get all my humans back into play, including Laboratory Maniac and Azami. Since I have no cards in my library, I win the game from this point. Although first I get to look at my opponent's library a bit with Architects of Will. So that was a very quick game 1. I win the game on the first turn. Now let's go over to game 2. So my opponent's on the play. Here I've got a fairly strong opening hand. It's not quite able to win the game, but I have a Simian Spirit Guide, and a Wild Cantor and a Dark Ritual, plus my Undercity Informer. So all I need is to draw a single mana source in order to win the game on the first turn again. However, my opponent had Despise, so he looks at my hand and smartly he took the Simian Spirit Guide, so I'm no longer able to cast anything with this hand. I draw some cards hoping to find a win condition, and he starts attacking me as aggressively as possible. Now this is the major problem with this deck. It has no way to interact, it doesn't play creatures or lands, it just draws the right hand and wins the game. So my opponent started casting vampires and killed me as quickly as possible. As you can see, by his turn 5, I was dead to his 5/5 Stromkirk Nobles and pair of Stromkirk Captains. So I really don't have any way of stopping an aggressive attack other than trying to find the combo and win the game before it's too late. Now let's go on to game 3. Once again, I found I had a perfect opening hand: Lotus Petal, Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, and one of these grinders who can exile my deck and win the game. So I go through the motions of the combo again. In Legacy, this deck can have a problem with cards like Force of Will and Daze, which can counter spells without paying any mana for them. But they're less commonly used in Tribal Wars. And in Legacy I use Pact of Negation, but in this format I didn't go with any protection at all, other than the 2 Cabal Therapies, which only work after the combo has been done. So the games I played with this deck had a tendency to be over very quickly, and unfortunately they weren't very interesting for either me or my opponents. So while this deck was an interesting thought experiment, and it shows that in this format it's possible to win the game on the first turn, I didn't find it very interesting to play, and I know my opponents weren't very interested in playing against it. So I think from now on I won't be playing this deck anymore, but I'll be sure to try coming up with new quirky tribal combo decks in the future.